How's it going, everyone? I'm your host, Sam Pasco, alongside Erik Halterman, and this is KBO Chats Live. We're breaking down everything in the world of KBO. For those of you just tuning in, welcome. The comment section is active on YouTube or Periscope. Comment away. Let us know your questions, and we will display them right here on the broadcast. Erik and I will do our best to answer it. Erik, before we begin, you want to introduce yourself a little bit to everyone tuning in tonight?
Yeah, how's it going? I'm Erik Halterman. I'm a RotoWire baseball staff writer. I would have said MLB staff writer before this year, but with the way the world goes, I'm a KBO guy now, like a bunch of people, and been enjoying learning a new league and writing about some live baseball.
Oh, it's for sure been some crazy times, but we got some crazy, interesting baseball now happening overseas. And I just want to first start with everyone that's still getting acclimated to the KBO. We're still only a couple games in, Dinos leading it, of course. But tell us a little bit about what is the KBO, the Korean Baseball Organization. What's been your first impressions of the league so far?
I think it's been some pretty good baseball. I mean, it's not MLB level, but I think we often overrate our ability as a fan to really tell the difference between, the 10th best baseball player in the world and the 300th best. I mean, can you really tell the difference between a 93 mile per hour fastball and a 90 mile per hour one on TV? I don't think so.
Mm-hmm.
For me, it's totally scratched the itch as good live baseball. I don't know about you.
No, I've enjoyed it. Definitely some of the pitching when you get towards the end of the games definitely look a lot slower, and there's some
Right.
meatballs there that they can take advantage of for some big innings. But overall, it's just great to see some live action overall, come back each and every day and see a box score,
Yep.
I've enjoyed it. And probably the worst part, though, is actually the timing for us here on the West Coast. You're talking 2 a.m. That's probably the one time slot. It'd be
Yep.
difficult. Like, do I stay up? Do I wake up early? But have you actually been able to tune into any games on ESPN and actually check out the live games?
So I'm very much a night owl these days. So here in the Central Time Zone, I'm in Chicago. So I guess it's Sunday morning, Saturday night games start at midnight. So I'm able to catch most of those. The 4:30 a.m. is a bit tough for me. So it's been my morning routine to wake up and watch the rebroadcast, which has been working out just fine for me.
For sure, the weekend games are a lot easier when those are a little earlier for us.
Yeah.
So let's dive now into the actual KBO teams. We'll pull up now the standings. It's kind of letting everyone know kind of who's the best of the league right now. We got our standings right now. Erik, take me through who you are going to power rank the teams. Who's your number one and who's your number two?
Number one has to be the Dinos. I mean, you can see right there by the standings, they've got a 3-game lead on everybody else, and it's backed up by their run differential. As you can see, they're outscoring teams by over 2 runs a game. They've just been dominant on both ends. They've got great starting pitching and one of the stronger lineups. Number two would be just a question of how much you weight this year versus last year. I would still give it to the Bears. They won last year and they've made it to most of the recent Korea series. So I think anytime you've got a team facing the Bears, you have good reason to be scared, even though their pitching, as you can tell right there, has been just downright bad. But there's, I believe, reason to believe their pitching will pick up in the future, which makes them still a scary team since they have one of the better offenses.
And we've kind of seen a logjam there at that second position. Bears, Twins, Heroes have kind of all been fighting for that. The Giants were in there before their loss last night. Do you give anyone else a chance actually at the title outside the Dinos or Bears? Is there a dark horse candidate that you kind of want to let the fans know about?
Well, the Heroes lost in the Korea series last year. I believe they were swept, but they've got quite a talented team. They had the top offense last year, and they still have a pretty good offense this year. I think there's good reason to believe that might pick up. They're a balanced team. They've got good hitting, good pitching. Well, not great hitting as you see right now, but given what they did last year, I think we could believe they might pick that up and have a chance.
Yeah, 5 runs a game for the Heroes. Pretty solid, decent, not amazing, but decent average margin of victory. My team to look out for actually is the KT Wiz. As you see, they have a losing record, but a pretty impressive average run margin. Erik, what's going on with the Wiz? Are they a team that people should maybe be a fan of?
Well, if you like offense, definitely. They've been the highest scoring team both games this week. I believe the last time they scored fewer than like 8 runs was 6 games ago. They're just absolutely on fire. They've got a 20-year-old phenom, Baeko Gang, is one of the more exciting Korean players to watch in the league. You could call him the Juan Soto of the KBO, obviously scaled down a bit for that league, but he's got power and contact and a great eye as a 20-year-old number 3 hitter driving that lineup.
And
so they definitely have a shot.
And they're streaking right now, 5-game win streak. So we'll have to keep an eye out on all of those teams. At the bottom, though, just got to mention the worst team, SK Wyrons. Do you see any hope for them? I mean, what's wrong with them?
Well, they've got a ton of injuries. A lot of their best players are out, and just everything isn't going right. They had a big lead at the start of the final month of the standings last year and had an epic, historic collapse. They finished tied with the Bears for the best regular season record last year. So maybe some of that poor momentum's carried into this year. But, we know small samples in baseball are something we need to learn to devalue. So if you take just 13 bad games this year versus an entire season where they were tied for the best record last year, I think there's definitely a chance you could see them start to move up once they get healthy. But as of right now, if I see a hitter facing the Wyverns or a pitcher facing the Wyverns, I'm pretty interested in that guy.
Well, we'll have to see because they did just win last night. Maybe they're going to pick up some momentum, hopefully, again, tomorrow morning, right? Not tonight, whatever that time zone
whenever it is, yeah.
Whenever it is to see them. So now talking from the best teams, moving now to the best players. Who is your kind of MVP? I know it's way too early, but let's first start on the at the dish on the batter's side. Who is the best player players should know right away?
Well, I've got 3 finalists for my early MVP. I mentioned Baeko Gang of the Wiz earlier, dominating. He's 3rd in OPS, 2nd in homers, 3rd in RBI, 3rd in slugging. He's at the top of almost everything. And again, he's just 20 years old. He should just keep improving. And then we've got a couple of foreign imports. Preston Tucker for the Twins. He's tied for 2nd in homers. He's got 20 RBI. The next closest guy has just 15. He's been absolutely on fire. He spent about half a year in the KBO last year, so he's not totally new to the league. He had strong numbers, but not a ton of homers. But the fact that he's got 5 already this year and just a ton of RBIs, as you're showing, means it seems like to me that he's settling in and he's set to be one of the better hitters all season. And then the final guy would be Roberto Ramos of the Tigers. He's an interesting one because most foreign players that come to the KBO have MLB experience. Obviously, KBO scouts are looking for guys who have at least held their own at the highest level. That actually doesn't describe Ramos because he never got above AAA, but he's only 25. And there's good reason to believe he would have made his MLB debut this year. I don't know exactly why he chose to go over to Korea, but he's having a ton of success. He's leading the league in homers, he's leading it in slugging, leading in OPS. It very much looks like he's proving himself to be an MLB caliber player over in Korea, and I would not be surprised if we saw him back stateside quite soon.
Now, Ramos has been one of the bright stars for the Twins, 6 home runs, like you said. Preston Tucker, for those who don't know, he tore up the minors when he was with the Astros, kind of that AA, AAA bouncing between the two, kind of just a log jam in the outfield with Reddick, Springer. And then he eventually played with the Braves and then the Reds, now into the KBO. But an interesting thing is he just overtook Jose Miguel Fernandez for that top spot on the batting average leaderboards. Can you tell us a little bit about Jose? Because he's been absolutely mashing. I know he's not number 1 on the average, but he's number 1 in hits, so tied for number 1. And more likely than not, he's on a hit streak.
Yeah, if I extended my finalist to 4, he definitely would have been the 4th. He's an interesting guy. He was signed, he's from Cuba. He was signed by the Dodgers a couple years ago, never got a chance with them, had a very brief time with the Angels, but never really got the chance to establish himself. He's now in his 2nd year with the Bears, I believe, and he was awesome last year, led the league in hits, and I believe he was 2nd in batting average. Mm-hmm. And there you go. And he's right up there again. He was, I think, a second baseman when he came to the States, but he's very much a first baseman now. If you could tell by his body type, he's definitely a first baseman / DH at this point. You could compare him to his countryman Yuli Gurriel as a first baseman who's contact over power, but is not totally absent of power. He's shown some power this season, but is mostly just has the ability to hit absolutely everything. And I would be surprised if he wasn't top 5 in hits, top 5 in batting average by the time this season's done.
Jose has definitely been very impressive this year. And let me ask you, do you see any of these guys trying to make the jump back into the majors potentially next year? Because we mentioned Ramos's age, that he could easily do that. And
right.
Preston Tucker easily probably could. But because of Jose's age, do you think there's any chance he does try to make that jump back or just continues to dominate the KBO?
It feels to me like he'd be more likely to stay in the KBO. If he's so good for 2 years in a row, I'm sure he could get at least a minor league deal. It's just a question of, does he want to give it another shot in his early 30s? But I would definitely be surprised if Ramos and Tucker aren't fielding MLB calls this winter.
Mm-hmm. And now moving on to our MVPs on the mound, who's taking the ball every 5th, 6th day. Walk me through who is your MVP on the rubber.
Your Choi Dong-Wan Award winner, as I learned about half an hour ago. 3 finalists there. Mike Wright for the Dinos. He's been awesome. He's got a 1.69 ERA. Not quite as dominant as the other 2, but he's faced some tough opponents. He's faced the Wiz and the Bears. I believe he just beat the Bears last night, or 1 or 2 nights ago he was on versus the Bears. His teammate, Chang Mo Koo, is probably the guy I'd give it to. He's got a 0.41 ERA, which, just 3 starts, but hard to complain about that. And interestingly for the KBO, he strikes out a ton of guys. He's got just about a 33% strikeout rate this season. Strikeout rate in the KBO is hanging around 18% compared to it's like 23-ish in MLB these days, I think. So he's got a strikeout rate so far that would absolutely be a very good mark even in MLB. And again, like his teammate Wright, he's faced the Wiz and the Bears and dominated both. So they're definitely 2 of the 3. The third candidate would be Eric Jokic of the Heroes. He's got an ERA of 0.53 and a WHIP under 1 as well. He's not quite as an elite of a strikeout guy, but he's got a solid strikeout rate right around 23%. Those would be the 3. If I have to give it to one guy, it would be Koo of the Dinos. I think that the strikeouts he's shown and the opponents he's faced have just been on another level from everybody else so far.
And kind of mentioning those strikeouts, moving now into the kind of the fantasy aspect, a lot of players are looking to these guys and saying who can contribute to my FanDuel and DraftKings lineup each and every night. So tell me first, how much does strikeouts count? Is it a big aspect? Because one guy that strikes out a lot is Aaron Altair, former Philly, former Met, former Giant. He had 1 plate appearance with them, struck
Something
out.
Like that,
yeah. But tell me, how important is that from both the pitching and hitting side? Is that something you got to target each and every night?
So you're not worried about strikeouts on the hitting side, but strikeouts definitely do matter for the pitchers. And I'm definitely looking for strikeout arms whenever possible, just because it's hard to predict a win. I mean, we can tell in a given matchup who's probably the favorite, but even then, it's not that easy to predict. But you are pretty sure with a strikeout arm, you're getting 5, 6, 7 strikeouts at least. Not too worried about it on the hitting side, though. Speaking of Altair, I would definitely like to see him striking out less often. That is not the stat line that the Dinos would want from their lone foreign hitter. But watching some of their games, it seems like he's hitting it to the warning track pretty often. So once he figures out the strikeouts, if he figures out the strikeouts, I would expect him to be pushing up towards one of the better hitters in the league, which he definitely is not at this point.
He for sure has that top prospect power. Didn't quite pan out in the pros, and right now, in terms of batting average, it's not panning out. And the 19 strikeouts in 13 games is concerning. So we'll have to see what happens with Aaron going forward. But just one of the members of that league-leading Dinos team that, like you said, has Mike Wright and Drew Rosinski, their opening day starter. Can you tell us a little about Rosinski? Has he been kind of ace caliber level so far?
I think he's been a little bit below that. He's not quite the strikeout arm but he's not giving up a ton of runs, but he's had at least one kind of more adventurous outing where it seems like he's dealing with base runners pretty often, but he's been able to escape without a ton of damage thus far. He's still somebody I'd be happy to own it whenever he's starting.
So speaking of owning, let's see who you got tonight. Let's move into your cheat sheet tonight. Some Thursday morning or deep Wednesday night, depending where you are in the country. Let's break me down, pitcher. Who is the one guy that you're making your lineup for the first time that you need to include tonight?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. This is kind of one of the weakest pitching slates I've seen in quite a while. And a few of the better pitchers are facing the Dinos or Bears, which makes me less interested in them. But I think the top guy I mentioned, Hyun Hee Han, would be my go-to. He had quite strong numbers last year, but it was in relief, which you'd expect those to fall off somewhat. And they have a little bit, but he's looked like he's held his own. He doesn't look like they're giving him short outings. I wouldn't be worried about the fact that he was a reliever last year. I think you can expect him to go around 100 pitches. And he's most interesting because he's playing the Wyverns, who have been quite bad this year. I mentioned earlier that I expect them to eventually pick it up, but with the way they're playing, I would look at almost any competent pitcher against them these days.
And just for people new to the KBO fantasy world, can you explain briefly kind of what does Kiwoom starting pitcher mean? Because this is kind of a new thing to the fantasy landscape where FanDuel doesn't actually list the pitchers. What's going on here?
Right. So over on DraftKings, it's, as far as I can tell, an identical format to their MLB contests. You got the same. You got two pitchers and then catcher, first baseman, second baseman, third base, shortstop, three outfielders, as you'd expect. FanDuel has gone with a simplified thing. You pick one pitcher, and it's the team starting pitcher, not the specific starting pitcher. I don't entirely know why they're doing that, but it is helpful to Americans, I guess, if you don't want to get screwed over by the fact that they change pitchers at 3:45 a.m. If you're playing on FanDuel, you're safe there. I assume that's why they're doing it. I don't know for sure. And then also on FanDuel, the rosters are scaled down. You just pick on the hitting side 2 infielders, 2 outfielders, and 2 utility. So on FanDuel, you care a whole lot less about trying to find that top catcher or second baseman or shortstop, somebody at a position of scarcity. Whereas on DraftKings, you do care about that. And I haven't run the numbers, but it does feel like positional scarcity is more of a thing in the KBO. In the MLB these days, it seems like we've had a run of amazing offensive shortstops and the like, but that seems to be on the whole slightly less common in the KBO. So that's definitely something to pay attention for DraftKings players.
And now let's move on to players for people to target on the offensive side. Break me down. Who are your top targets? You mentioned kind of the lack of depth a little bit. So who's the number one guy you're going to go out there and spend a lot of your budget on?
So you've got a couple of the top targets there, but the guys I'm probably most excited are ones you find down a bit in the stacks section. The number one guy today probably would be Baek-ho Gong of the Wiz. They're facing a pitcher in E1 Kim who just is not exciting at all. He's got some of the weirdest stat lines I've seen. He has a quite good career ERA. It hasn't been very much. He only threw a few innings last year and some this year. Yeah, a 4.26 ERA last year, despite walking 6 more guys than he struck out. If he had more of a track record, you might think he's one of those rare pitchers who has the secret sauce to somehow outperform all his peripherals. But given that we've seen, 50 odd innings of him, he's definitely a guy I'm looking to get hitters against. And Baek-ho Gong can hit against anybody. So I'm very excited to start him against Kim.
And how much do you like the other guys, Rojas as well? Break me down this stack. Do you think it's just going to be?
So if I was to only grab one of that stack, it would definitely be Gong. Rojas is nearly as good as Gong, and it's essentially the same price. They've strangely been batting him mostly 5th, despite the fact that he's just on an absurd hot streak to start the season, and he's been one of their best hitters for a few years. but I think you could definitely justify both of them. Then I threw a guy Young Ho Jo in there as a cheaper option if you're looking to round that out and get a whole bunch of whiz in your lineup. He is only playing because of an injury to Han Jun Yu, but he's been occupying the third spot in the order. You can see his gaudy 565 batting average, which is obviously in a tiny, tiny sample. But anytime you get a guy for this cheap who's batting third and the best offense in the league, that's the kind of guy I'm interested in.
Great. Well, Erik, we're running up on time here, but I want to say thanks for everyone for tuning in. We'll be back here twice a week, breaking down the KBO, talking the best picks for the day ahead, and then also just a league overview, talking what's going on. Erik, any other notes people should look out for coming up in this week of KBO?
Well, I'm expecting a lot of offense tonight. So if you like offense and haven't tuned into a game yet, I would recommend checking one out tonight.
Yes, definitely stay up. Hey,
yeah.
Oh boy, it's 3
a.m.
Who can keep track now? But we got some great games tonight. 5 games every day. That's one thing I got to say I enjoy about it is you get six days of the week, have a game, 5 games a day. And of the 6, you get 2 series. I think it's a pretty good format. I like it. What do you think?
Yeah, nice and steady. And honestly, the 10-team format is really nice for new fans. It's pretty easy to learn. You can learn all the teams pretty quickly, and you can learn, a player or two on most of the teams pretty fast. I think that's pretty friendly to new fans.
Well, Erik, thanks. Let's wrap it up here. Guys, check us out on Twitter at RotoWireKBO. Back on there every day. Erik, you got the cheat sheets daily. I got the videos. Keep it here. RotoWire.com, the go-to source for all your KBO fantasy needs. We got you, Erik. Anything else?
Nah, thanks for coming, guys.